Hoyoverse will fail Genshin from the attacks of Wuthering Waves if this keeps up. So we're going to go ahead and dive into this. I'm really interested to see what the take is on this video. So let's go ahead and see.
Alright everyone, Maharib is here, and I can safely say that this is Genshin's last chance of revival. Otherwise, with the release of Wuthering Waves, Genshin is going to have a big problem.
Okay.
I know most of big content creators are scared of saying the term Genshin killer because of what happened with Tower of Fantasy, but it is no joke that even a game like Tower of Fantasy used Genshin's name to get the attention of a lot of players.
Okay, so right off rip with that first thing, right? And I think that this is kind of giving that context. I hear that a lot. People are scared because of what happened to Tower of Fantasy. People, oh, don't do what Tower... Like, the problem that Tower of Fantasy had was that they went around themselves as a company saying they were going to be the Genshin killer. So when you promote and you present yourself that way, and you have people within the community of either Genshin Impact or people that are saying, hey, I'm going to be a TOF community member, they're, of course, going to follow suit. They're, you know, obviously, I would say, like, for example, it's the leading by example mentality. They're going to see you doing something, so they're going to follow it. So that is what further pushed that whole narrative of Genshin killer. The problem Tower of Fantasy ran into was that they were not able to live up to that expectation that they set. So it also then had a trickle-down effect of them losing a huge percentage of their player base within like the first 30 days. And a lot of that was because of the fact that they just were not able to live up to an expectation that they set. In this current scenario, Wuthering Waves has not pushed any agenda. Whether, yes, a matter of the fact is that no matter what we say, they are going to directly be compared to Genshin Impact. But that's a whole nother thing I want to talk about too, but let's get a little bit further in the video.
That game didn't turn out as players expected is another matter. But one thing is certain, that Genshin is not unkillable as a lot of players think these days. And in my eyes, Wuthering Waves don't need to be so much better than Genshin or needs to have another level of marketing or anything of that sort. Even a new ripoff of Genshin is able to kill Genshin at this point. And I know you think I am just talking nonsense, but let me cook. First thing we will do here is to figure out why players are not boycotting Genshin, or as to why they cannot stop playing the game, at least for now. There are 3 factors in it. Number 1 is that those who save for certain characters, and it's general among the player base. Although some content creators say characters are not content, but they are. Players save for months for a single character.
Okay, so that's one thing I will say. I feel like characters in the gacha realm is a aspect to content. It's a part of a content update, but it's not the content itself, right? Obviously, character story, the actual thing that you're going to go and do, right? The character coming into the game, I mean, to be quite fair, having the same content, playing the same thing, doing the same thing, you could do that with literally any other character in the game. A lot of the times, the big incentive to updates, bringing new characters into the game, a huge part of that is the fact that there's something new to do, something new to experience. There's a reason why when you look at games like HSR, for example, whenever they bring a massive major unit coming into the game, there's a massive map update. There's a new region to go into. There's an expansion. There's a new game mode. You know, there's something to correlate or to coincide with that character, because a character by themselves does not make a game more enticing necessarily. Granted, that could be a very big reason as to why someone might play a game, but I don't think that that's necessarily the entirety of, for a whole player base, our characters are the only things that's going to be bringing people in. I mean, it is a part, but it is not the content itself. It is I would say, very, very, if I was to give it a percentage, I would say a character is probably about anywhere from 10 to maybe 20% of an actual update, depending on what the character is doing and, you know, how well received, or even if the people even like the character to begin with. So that's just kind of my opinion there, but let's continue.
Not expect them to just not log into the game and stop playing when they're already invested enough, and don't want to back out when they're so close to having that character. Someone who is saving for, let's suppose, Alhaitham, and he gets to know that he is going to rerun in version 4.6. Now you can't stop him from logging into the game. And after 2 months, when he gets Alhaitham, now you can't stop him from playing the game with the character he saved for so long. It's the same situation with me. I log into the game, get primos, log out. Or I just record gameplay to use as my video background. That's how much I play Genshin. And the rest of my day is
Okay.
spent creating a script on how much I hate this game.
So this
What a
seems
mess
to
my
kind of
life
be
has
like
become.
this kind of seems to also be coming from like a content creator standpoint as well, from what Morb is saying, because I guess that can't happen, right? And I think that that's also the understanding of like, even when Wuthering Waves comes out, I think like what a lot of people, and granted, I'm super hyped for Wuthering Waves, but realistically, there are going to be down periods, right? There are going to be periods of time where there's not really much going on, especially if you're one of those people that like to super sweat the game. If you're super sweating the game, there's going to be a period of time where you're just going to be doing random stuff like finding like leaves and literally farming echoes or something. Like it's gonna be like super random. You're not gonna really have like a crazy like objective. You might be more on that like fine-tuning level or aspect of the game. You might be on more exploration. It just kind of is gonna vary. And we still have yet to really seen the full extent of like what is going to transpire after the game hits that cycle of okay, that was the update. Now you have to just kind of do stuff, with, your dailies and things of that nature that you might end up having. So it's going to be something that will be presented as the game comes out. And I think that kind of goes into the realistic aspect or expectation of what's to come is that the main thing is that when things do come up in the game, we're going to be getting new, fresh things or things that actually make players want to dive right back into the game for that next update, right?
By the way, it's not something big enough to stop players from switching to a different game, but it is still a factor worth considering. But still, even with that new character you got, the next character you will get will be after 2 to 3 months. And if you lose your 50-50, it can go up to 5 months to get the next limited 5-star character as a free-to-play. That's why the more you play the game, the more boring this game starts to feel again. And switching to a new game feels like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, and I'm again reiterating that point. Swap into a brand new game, you're going to go through a similar cycle. And that's one thing that I feel like is for a lot of people is that you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're burning yourself out because that can happen with any game. That's just how it is, right? If you play too much of something too often, you can experience burnout. And that's not always the case, but with the way that gachas are typically set up, with the emphasis of premium currency coming from the allotted amount of time that you put in, if you're free to play, especially, there's a reason why there's such a huge emphasis for those that like to spend because they might not want to put as much time. And again, that kind of goes into your values as a player, right? So that's basically that,
You know what else feels like a breath of fresh air? Going outside and touching grass. But still, if Genshin don't start to give more free-to-play rewards, Wuthering Waves will steal all those players from Genshin. And I am so looking forward to that. There is a general type of play style players like these days, especially the open world aspect of the game, which is not in a lot of other gacha games. And that's one reason why Genshin players don't like Honkai Star Rail, myself included. But my main reason for not liking Honkai Star Rail is still its lazy-ass turn-based combat system, which I hate even more than the entire Genshin.
I think that's subjective, to be honest. I think that this is kind of, again, this is a very subjective take, just because, again, some people could even argue, for example, right? There's people that are literally saying Genshin Impact or Wuthering Waves is literally copy pasta from Genshin Impact. And my thing is that you can usually tell when someone has only played one type of game or has only played a singular game because Genshin Impact is not the foundation for open world games, right? If we're just being 100% honest here. And I've been hearing that quite a bit. And like I said, it's not about the whole Wuthering Waves versus Genshin Impact thing for me, but it's just the fact that there are other games that exist, right? I'm not going to give you my age, but I am at a certain age bracket where Genshin Impact isn't necessarily the first game that I think about when we're talking about open world experiences. And so I kind of even feel like when you're looking at other games, it's also one of those things where you have to kind of be realistic to the comparison, right? I wouldn't necessarily compare Genshin Impact to Honkai Star Rail because it is a different it's just a completely different genre of gameplay style. And so for those that were looking for something that was a little bit less grindy in terms of I have to run around everywhere, I need to be on my computer to really play this, it's giving them more of an opportunity to play something that is still giving them that esque feel of like Genshin with the style of characters. And I would even argue, to be fair, like I see a lot more people that like Honkai than not like Honkai. And I think that again kind of goes into like that subjective, like, hey, you could personally not like something, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. That's just that person's opinion, right? So kind of the same thing with how I feel like Wuthering Waves is going to be this certain kind of game. That's my opinion. And that's just purely based off of my experiences, right? So it can't really like say a right or wrong thing about the experience of a game, because even games that you might feel are bad, there might be something that makes a player feel like it's good, right? So that's just kind of that.
Impact combined. But my salute to those players who enjoy that kind of combat. You guys are built different. But now with Wuthering Waves, it is exactly what Genshin players wanted. I am not talking about overhyping of Wuthering Waves happening recently. I will talk about that later in the video. But the open world, cute anime waifus, decent combat. I don't really care about the story, but if you think it's a factor, add that as well. It's just that Wuthering Waves' similarity with Genshin Impact with these key features is enough to entice a Genshin player to try Wuthering Waves at least once.
Yeah. I think that that's the important thing, right? Because a lot of people, they'll go to the amount of like, and it's kind of crazy that I see more people concerned with how happy or how optimistic people are, and not really concerned with how much pessimistic like takes there are, right? That to me is like one of the big things I'm like, dude, like let people have their fun. Like, for example, I don't go around murdering the hype that a Genshin Impact player has on their game. You know why? Because if they're enjoying the game and they truly are having fun, I don't want to take away from that. Like, what's the point of me taking away from that, right? Why would I do that? It makes no sense for me. I gain absolutely nothing. And this is something that we just see kind of across the internet, like people just wanting to crap on each other. And it's just kind of one of those things where I kind of look at it in the perception like misery likes company, because I see it a lot with the Wuthering Waves stuff. Like we're enjoying ourselves in our bubble with Wuthering Waves, and then they're like, oh, your game's going to be garbage. It's going to die after 30 days. I'm like, whoa, like, hold on, man. We just chilling. Like, so it's like stuff like that where I'm just like, hey, listen, we want you guys to come over here and enjoy the game. And that kind of goes into that like point of view, is that I don't want to see Genshin Impact just die. And I'm going to kind of talk about that whole Genshin killer thing in a second. But yeah, I don't want to see Genshin Impact die. I want to see people be able to pick up Wuthering Waves and still have those updates that come where they can enjoy Genshin Impact. If they choose to swap over and convert, hey, welcome. We appreciate you for coming through. But nonetheless, I feel like there are still going to be a good chunk of people that will still play Genshin Impact for the allotted time and maybe even money that they might have put into the game. And also, like I said, playing Wuthering Waves just really all kind of depends on how they feel and really what Wuthering Waves ultimately is catering to, or who they're catering to at the end of the day.
If you think that the advantage Genshin got during COVID makes it unbeatable, you are surely mistaken. Yes, it was a factor of Genshin's success, but it is not the case now. Any game that is good enough and is similar to Genshin is able to attract Genshin players. And when all of the content creators have nothing but good to say about Wuthering Waves, it just makes it more appealing to the general public. Regarding the overhyping of this game, this is indeed a problem worth mentioning, but is not a major issue against the game in my opinion. As far as what I am seeing all over the internet, the main reason of this overhyping is because after a failure of Tower of Fantasy and extremely low expectations from Genshin Impact and a lot of players backlashing Zenless Zone Zero on its closed beta, when players saw that Wuthering Waves made a huge progress in CBT2 as compared to its previous CBT, it was more than what they expected from Kuro Games in comparison to their previous experience with different companies.
I would say, yeah, I agree with that last part. It was more so about the experience with the company versus it just being this amazing looking game. There's so many amazing looking games that have terrible player experiences. I think the biggest takeaway from everything that Kuro has presented has been how they have been handling the player base. If you look at the most recent issue that Genshin Impact's players have been having, has been based around how they feel the company is treating them. And with that then has the underlying factors of the gameplay, the release of update, content, communication. Those things all trickle down from that one baseline. And so when you're looking at the baseline of Kuro, is it really overhyped? No. It is just hype. And that's simply because they're fueling it. They're giving us reasons to fuel it. Just like Tower of Fantasy fueled the Genshin Impact killer narrative, Kuro is fueling the basically from just their actions, we care about our player base, and we're going to make sure that we show you that. We're going to make sure that you guys are informed. We're going to make sure that you guys know, because even like when people say like, oh, the Wuthering Waves devs disappeared, no, they didn't. They were still communicating with us. They were still dropping dev notes the entire time. They just weren't putting out PVs. They weren't advertising anything, and it wouldn't have made any sense for them to. They're trying to redo the game at that point, so why would they be putting out PVs for marketing? It just wouldn't make sense. So at that time, they were still engaging their audience, and it was more so the audience that already was there and was committed to wanting to be a part of the community. Now I think they're stepping into that expansion, because we even have now, for the first time, have seen one of our first ads for Wuthering Waves with the Genshin showcase. So again, just kind of painting that picture. I agree with the last part. I feel like there's different point of views based off of what community that you're coming from, but 100%, most of that hype coming, at least from those that come from Kuro Games already with Punishing Gray Raven, is primarily coming from what they already have seen Kuro do and what they're continuing to see them do. And I think in turn that enticed those other communities to come in and say, ooh, cool, like you guys have this company that's actually like willing to listen to you guys. That might be worthwhile, in terms of our time and us even trying the game, right?
Do a massive positivity among player base for this game. Combine that with the exaggerated nature of social media, and you get a game that is unparalleled in its highness and will completely obliterate Genshin at its core. Everything is based off of expectations versus reality. Previously, when players were not expecting that much quality from Wuthering Waves, and it got massive improvements, it made a very good impression. But now if players expect it to be better than Genshin in every possible way, and a perfect game according to their own mindset, and after that when they will see that this game has this or that flaw or is different from Genshin in one way or another, it will indeed hurt both the player and the game. It is good to have high expectations from a game which is being developed by a really good company, because although I never played Punishing Gray Raven, but I've heard a lot of players enjoy that game, and this really speaks for itself that the developers really know what they're doing. But over expectations from anything always ends up hurting at both sides.
I feel like the other thing is too, it's just again, like when we're talking about expectations and like what a company is doing, like I said, it's just being realistic. Like the idea that every update is going to be a big update. Probably not, right? Every update that I would say we're going to have is probably going to be giving us a little bit of something that we didn't get in the last update. But then there will probably be those really, really big updates that they do all the marketing for, that they try to, bring more players in with. There's going to be those breaks. And that's just because we have to realize that there are humans working on this game. There are teams that they need time to cook. I think, again, the biggest thing and the reason why it is still okay to have high expectations is when there is a open channel of communication. And that is one of the things that I have at least seen that the Genshin Impact players have been missing, is that there isn't this channel of open communication for them to be able to know, hey, this is what's going to be transpiring, X amount of time from now, right? And so what you tend to have happen is that players now have to make up their own mind on what exactly is happening. And if you leave your players or your community to their own devices to make up the narrative, a lot of the times they're going to make up the worse narrative than better, right? And that's just kind of the nature of any game. And all the games that I've covered, that's 100% how it's always been.
Important type of players are those who already spent money in this game. For them, this is not just a game, but is an investment or a product that they bought, and now they must use it, or in this case, play the game money just to feel like their money is not going to waste.
Yep, 100%.
For those players to leave the game is very, very hard. And of course, these are the players who are running Genshin in the first place. Free-to-play players like me have it so easy to switch to a different game, but here is the fun part. Players who are whales and have a lot of money to spend on video games don't care about what game they play. Some of them have a type of superiority complex which makes them play the game with every character at C6 with her 5 weapon. And others already have enough that they don't care. They have enough to spend on multiple games at a time, or just switch to different game if they find it interesting.
Yeah.
The real problem is for dolphins or low spenders. For them, every penny is valuable. A whale may not claim Welkin Primo gems every day, but a low spender will. There are so many low spenders or dolphins at Genshin that their combined worth makes it more than that of the whales.
Well, okay, so here's the thing, right? everybody has value in a community, right? And I think that this is like something that I've been kind of understanding, like the longer I've been a content creator in the gacha sphere, is that everyone has value. And so when you're looking at free to play players, free to play players get crapped on all the time by like people that spin, for example, or even some CCs I've seen say it, and I'm like, okay, you just obviously are just ignorant to it. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, but having a lack of knowledge of something can lead to you having a certain point of view or an opinion of something. So a lot of players and just creators, they don't realize that free to play players, yes, they are experiencing a game for free, but they hold typically the highest amount of accumulative time on the game. Why is that important? Because for a company, for different endorsements, for different sponsorships, for different things that they are looking to have, kind of coincide and invest in their product or their company, they're going to be pushing, hey, look at how long our players stay on our game. Look at how long, and they're doing this. And when we have these updates, they come and they spend this amount of time, because time, no matter what people think, still equates to money. And so that is why even for free to play, when you see these big situations happen and there's all this uproar, it makes a lot of sense that yes, these players are still going to be a very, very massive and pivotal aspect to a game's success, even if they're not putting money into the game, because, again, technically they still can and they still are helping the game make money. Now, is it nearly as much as that guy that's spending the 20,000, 30,000 individually? Probably not. Absolutely not, right? Those guys are still going to have and hold a much larger aspect or portion of the economy of the game. And that's just because, again, when we're talking about what a free-to-play singular person's value is for the amount of time versus the time and the money that somebody else might have spent, it's not as valuable, but it doesn't make it not valuable. And I think that that's kind of that picture, just kind of giving that understanding makes it to where it's like, hey, everybody holds value. And companies aren't just looking at free to play players as this, oh, just throw them away. Because if that was the case, then you would only ever really see games that would have purchasing or buy-ins to even play it in the first place. And it wouldn't have it open to free to play players if there wasn't some sort of lucrative aspect for them, even if it was just purely the fact that word of mouth is super important, and those players are going to be pushing the game to other players, right? So it's like stuff like that you have to just kind of be aware of,
But if they stop spending money in one game for some time, they can switch to a different game. It's just that I can't think of a way from where Genshin can claim that they are secure from the attacks of Wuthering Waves, unless Genshin do something about it. And you know that they're not doing anything. Next thing is very obvious. If Genshin content creators convert into Wuthering Waves content creators, well, that's a huge dent on Genshin. Content creators are just free advertisement of the game, and the way Genshin treats its content creators is not a secret to anyone. Imagine if you were king with an army of powerful knights, but you treat those knights like shit. What will happen when you will have to fight against an equivalent force? Your knights will switch sides, and you will lose the battle as well as your kingdom.
I feel like this is also kind of one of those things where, again, when we're looking at like the Wuthering a Wave attacks, I don't feel like that part of this is what they're doing. I don't feel like they're intentionally like we're attacking Genshin Impact. I feel like what it is what it does become. It can be looked at as maybe a form of an attack, but I also feel like that is just kind of what happens when you're working and you're focusing on your own thing, right? That's why the saying like "do you" always is like such a very predominant saying when a person just needs to focus on what they have going on, because the work itself is going to speak, right? And so if people, again, the communities, we start to take things and we start doing this with it. We're looking at it side by side, and it's like, well, honestly, this is looking much better. They're doing this, they're doing that, they're communicating, they're, whatever it might be. That by itself is going to speak more volumes than if Wuthering Waves was getting on their platforms and saying, we're going to be a better game than Genshin Impact. We're going to, completely change everything. Like they're not really pushing that narrative. So that's why I don't feel like Wuthering Waves' goal is to necessarily attack Genshin. I think that it should, and is seeming to be more about being able to coexist within the space, but having a respect of we're our own game and our own entity, and we are able to again hold our own weight. I think that again is more of a thing that community is kind of setting as far as attacks versus what the company is actually trying to do. Because I would say if we have learned anything from the Genshin Impact killer or Genshin Impact dying from this or whatever you want to kind of say it as, that's not really good for a company. And again, I would say if you think the expectations for the game are high now, if they were to start pushing that, that would raise the expectations to a point where they really honestly could not make one mistake. And if they did, it could be one of those not being able to return from it situations. So I would say I'm at least happy and proud of the fact that Wuthering Waves has kind of made it more so about what they have going on, and they're not pushing that narrative themselves.
Attitude of Genshin developers towards their player base, and how they are becoming deaf to their audience's voice and blind to their concerns. The time is not too far when us Genshin players will totally lose hope and completely ditch this game and switch to Wuthering Waves. I am also hyped for the game, and I might start making content about this game when it releases. And you know yours truly is a busy person and cannot play 2 games at a time. So I will say goodbye to Genshin
facts. I can
and
see
only
that.
play the game when there is a new nation releases and I have to pull for an Archon. By the way, let me know what you think about the situation. As far as I know, Genshin developers needs to understand that if there is a Genshin killer in this world, it's not Wuthering Waves, it's not Tower of Fantasy, it's not any other game, it's Hoyoverse itself. They still have time to start learning from their mistakes, make more in-game content, start listening to what their player base has to say, and make changes in the game accordingly, and start giving value to their players. Otherwise, if Wuthering Waves or any other game starts to steal their players, they will have no one to blame but themselves.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of this also too is like, even when we're talking about Genshin dying and stuff like that, very subjective, right? Because you have to also consider how many players actually have the same concerns or issues as you. And that's something that I've learned from a lot of the other games that I've played. I would like complain about, oh, the gameplay is not this and this not that. And then coming to the reality that majority of the player base I would say I'm speaking for could be like 20%, right? Whereas the rest of the player base is like, honestly, it's fine. I work a 9 to 5. So, they're not being like super crazy in-game content. I could just get on the game and like ooga booga is perfectly fine with me, right? So I think that that's another thing that's like going to be a really important thing when we're looking at both games, right? Is again, what is the value for each individual player that makes up that collective group? Because not every player is playing for in-game content. Not everybody has the same amount of time to spend as everybody else. So there's going to be different variances that affect that player experience or even the wants and needs of the player. And I would even say when we're talking about Genshin Impact dying, I will say it's almost impossible, right? And this is just simply because of one, there's already people hooked to the game. Two, they would need to make $0 for that to be the case, right? And that would need to be something that is consecutively happening. I mean, not even just $0, but almost equivalent value in terms of what they're currently making now and seeing a significant dip in revenue. That's usually the big telltale. Even if they were to drop a few million, it wouldn't necessarily mean that the game is dying. It would just mean that they had something happen and it was a really, really bad month for them, right? In comparison to what they might normally make. Whereas I've seen games that went from making $1 million a month to say making 50,000 a month. Whew, buddy, that's bad. And so at that point, a lot of companies are going to start looking at how can we break even and cut our losses there. Or in some worse cases and scenarios, they just have to cut the game altogether and they just kind of take an L. So a lot of the times it's going to need to be a situation like that. And do I feel like Genshin is just going to somehow magically fall into that position? Really just all kind of depends on what I would say is a really important aspect that Hoyoverse just plays really well into is the social aspect. They really do a good job. And I mean, it just is what it is. They keep everything in house. I think people like fail to realize like the marketing tactics that Hoyo uses is genius. They made entire beef between their own game. And I feel like that's almost super intentional. Genshin Impact versus Honkai Star Rail. It's in-house. So it kind of goes into that saying, any publicity is good publicity, right? So even if bad publicity is happening to Genshin Impact, but it's good reviews for Honkai Star Rail, it kind of makes sense that that's kind of the narrative they're trying to set because, like I said, it's all in the same bubble. And if you could take people that's like, oh, I don't want to play Genshin anymore because they're not willing to bend a knee there, they're just going to convert over to their other game where that money is all going back into the same pot, right? So it's just really one of those subjective things that kind of comes along with picking up these different games. And when a company is a certain way, the only real way to kind of make them listen is to hurt their pockets across the board. And I feel like that's just not going to happen. Like, you're not going to have Honkai Star Rail players saying we're not going to play Honkai Star Rail, even though it all is collectively Hoyoverse, right? And so with that being said, I don't feel like Genshin is going to be killed by anything. I feel like, yes, they can hurt themselves, but I don't think they're going to die, right? And if it really ever comes down to it, you will then, of course, see them make a shift or adjustment because they're just not going to let one of their biggest like money cows or cash cows just die, you know?
The way, I heard that the guy responsible for making Genshin an absolute mess will be transferred to Zenless Zone Zero, and that Honkai guy will come to Genshin Impact. Is that correct? Do let me know. And I will see you in the comments section. Free Palestine. Peace.
All right. So, yeah, man. I mean, honestly, this was a really, really well done video. I feel like, honestly, overall, though, I respect Morhab's opinion. Like, I respect everybody's opinion. I always like having these types of dialogues, though, and I probably will try to have more people come on the channel where we have these types of dialogues because I think it is really important to kind of understand each other as we come into a community. Again, a lot of you guys, I'm hoping, you know, if you are from Genshin Impact or if you are from Honkai Star Rail, you become WoW fans and you become a part of the WoW community. There's nothing in the gaming sphere that says because you're a part of one community, you can't be a part of another, right? That's just not how gamers operate. Once a gamer, you're always a gamer. And so I'm really just hoping that with what we have going on with WoW, they just continue to focus on them. I don't think that there is a need for them to focus on Genshin Impact at all. There is no real competition there, in my opinion, in terms of, you know, having to go out of their way marketing and doing that. Like, they just honestly need to keep doing them, and the rest is going to speak for itself. I feel like the game is going to have layers that's going to cater to not only casual, but also to the in-game aspect that a lot of players have been asking for from Genshin Impact. And so for me, honestly, like I said, guys, this is all about positivity. This is all about being able to have a level-headed conversation about these types of things. And I feel like for what it's worth, we definitely are going to all have an amazing time, even if you decide to start playing for this, like the first month and then you dip, or if you decide to be a long-term player, we'll be there. Again, guys, make sure you guys come through and make sure you guys follow me on my Twitch at twitch.tv/Zoxaskun. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel because we are going to be having a crap ton of stuff on the channel, guys. I'm talking about reactions, guides. We're going to have people come on the channel, collaborations, a whole bunch of different things. So this is not just going to be a singular topic-oriented channel, but it will all be relevant to Wuthering Waves. So that's basically going to be that, guys. I hope to see you guys for CBT2. We will be live streaming that a crap ton. Everybody, stay blessed, and I will catch you guys in the next one.